So the question is, do I have to be able to read music in order to be a composer? So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit over the next couple of minutes. As you can see, I'm here in my new studio, and you can also see that I'm not really set up yet. Things are kind of strewn everywhere, so they're getting set up. Yeah, just thinking about this question about reading music and being a composer, thought I'd just reflect on some thoughts. So I think the answer to the question is no, you don't have to be able to read music to be a composer, because there's lots of different ways to compose music, and particularly now we have DAW software and all these things. Increasingly more and more it's possible to compose music that works really well without being able to read music. And I think really it depends upon what kind of music you want to write, and also what sort of opportunities you're interested in composing music for. So my main field that I'm involved in is music for screen and music for film, however you want to call it. And there are many, many examples of composers who do that professionally, who don't read music. I won't name them because I wonder if I could be wrong, or they might have learned since they said they couldn't read music. Perhaps they've learned by now. But there are many very prominent, some of the very most prominent film composers don't read music. So because they largely create music that is being performed by them often, or if you are creating music that you are going to play into your computer and record and all that sort of thing, and you're not going to have any external musicians playing on it, then no, there's really no need for notation to ever be created for that music. You can just record it and improvise, and however you work through that composition, and that's that. I suppose notation comes into play really when you then want to bring in a musician to perform on these pieces. Maybe you bring in a violinist or a flautist or something who needs to be able to read a particular part, and so that may require the use of some notation. But other than that, it's possible that the music doesn't need to be committed to notation at all. The other thing, I suppose, is if you composed a piece that you then wanted to be able to sell the music for, then you would need to be able to commit it to notation. That if you wanted to sell sheet music. However, I mean, one thing I would say is reading music allows you to do several things other than having musicians play your music. You can sort of, through learning to read music, you can kind of analyze other people's music that's written. You know, behind me I've got all these scores and things, and you can sort of follow those scores while you're listening, or study them and things, and kind of learn different pieces of musical vocabulary and ideas, and even things like orchestration, textures and things that you can see in the score, sort of where things come in and out, how things are combined. I recommend, actually, even if you don't particularly read music, that you could still do listening and score reading, because you can see the shape of where things come in and out, particularly in an orchestral score. If you want to write orchestral music, I think it's helpful just to be able to see the shape of things and sort of how things come in and out and expand and contract and things like that. And the other thing about reading music that really helps me as a composer is, for me, it helps me do the sort of working out, if you like, of the music. So if you think back to your maths class at school, at least if I think back to my maths class at school, they first of all taught us how to do simple sums, which we could do in our heads and so on, and then taught us more complex sums, and for that we had to do the working out on a piece of paper. And one thing it always said was, show your working. Right, so you had to sort of write out all the sort of stacking of ideas, and then you get to the answer. And I think that's true for me, for music as well, that for me, sometimes I have to think through an idea and I have to write it down in order to stack ideas on top of it and develop that idea. And I suppose that's partly because that's one of the ways that I was taught, kind of working from some of the principles that get taught about Bach and chorales and counterpoint and these types of things. So some of those principles that I was taught through writing music have allowed me to sort of, as I'm composing now, I can use notation to explore an idea perhaps more deeply than I could if I wasn't using notation. Now, that being said, this idea of stacking and developing ideas is also very much doable in a DAW. So I suppose it's a case of to each their own. For me, I've found that there's a sort of, I mean, almost mathematical, that's the way I think about it. It's almost, for me, it feels like I'm working out a sum on a page. That's how it feels to me when I'm using notation as a means to sort of develop a musical idea. So I think notation can give you that as well. It can sort of help you create perhaps more complex things than you could do without it. But again, that may be a controversial point because, quite frankly, that can all be done in the DAW as well. So it's just my thoughts on the subject. Yeah, so it allows you to, yeah, so then there's one other thing I was going to say about this, which is that part of my career has been working for composers, some who read music and some who didn't. And one thing it's that my sort of music literacy of notation has allowed me to do is sort of fill in the blanks for someone else. So I could work for a composer who doesn't particularly read music, and then when they have to work with an orchestra, when they have to record their music with live musicians, I could be the person who could translate what they've done in the DAW to notation and then take that to the performers. And in some ways, that was how I got my start in composing. So yeah, so if you wanted to be an orchestrator, it's essential, I would say, to read notation, just because largely the role is taking what the composer has written, often in a MIDI form, and translate that usually into Sibelius or Dorico. Finale's now no more, sadly. But you know, or pencil and paper is also possible, but tends to be done now MIDI to Sibelius or Dorico, and sort of translate that into a score and then taking that to the players. So that's another role that one can fulfill if one reads music. So yeah, that's it. I'm going to stop there. But there's just some thoughts on, do you need to be able to read music to be a composer? No, you don't. It depends upon what type of music you want to write, and it depends upon what sort of opportunities you're interested in composing music